Hi. I thought I'd take a break here out by my favorite spot, which is right by my camper. I call her the dreamsicle. Bet you can tell why. But I've been out doing some clearing in the garden and I needed to take a little break. And so it seems like a good time to chat, visit for a little while. I have been trying so hard to get so many things done. I always think that by the end of September, I should have a lot of my gardening stuff completed, or at least most of it. It should be just about all tucked away, except for maybe some beets and carrots, which is still true. But I don't know why I think that once my beans and tomatoes are done, that things are going to get a lot easier, because really I'm just in the throes of it then. From mid-September through October and even into November is when I'm really processing and staying busy. But I do get sidetracked in that sometimes. A few days ago, I was supposed to busily be working on my publishing project that's coming along. I have a book coming out within the next very short while, this month still, called Haven for Love, and it's a compilation of two novellas. One is Heart Not Taken, which was published some years back, and then I got my rights back for it this year, and I'm re-editing and reissuing it in this compilation. And the other one is a brand new novella called A Chosen Pursuit, and they're both rather contemporary, not ultra contemporary, but rather contemporary novellas. And I just wanted to get them out there again. I wanted to get the one out there for the first time. So I've been working away on formatting my manuscript and re-editing, and you have to format them different for ebook versus paperback, and I'm trying to issue them in both types. So it's been very busy. But of course, at the same time, I'm trying to get the garden taken care of. So I went outside the other day to dump some scraps, and instead of getting right back at it, I got a little sidetracked because I saw pine cones, pretty pine cones. And I thought, oh, see, about a week ago, I saw a video because, like you, I like to turn on videos or podcasts or whatever while I'm doing my work. And I saw a video of a guy who did a test burning pine cones in his wood stove. He had made sure they were very dry. He had spread them out on a tray for a couple of weeks, stuck a moisture checker into them to see that their moisture content was very low. And then he put a kilo of them, which I assume to be fairly close to a pound. I don't know my kilos. And he put them in his wood stove, and he wanted to see if they'd burn for an hour. And they did. And he didn't start counting the time until it got up to a good heat level. And then he started the timing. And by the time they were down to, just about an hour had passed by the time they burnt down to just a little tiny bit of coals. But the cool thing about pine cones is that he threw a couple in there and they just poofed right back up instantly again. But this made me curious, but pine cones can be very pitchy, like this white pine cone here, very pitchy. And the pine has a tendency to create more creosote, especially if there is a moisture content to it, or much of a moisture content to it. You have to be careful about that. And so I wouldn't recommend just using a pile of pine cones to burn in your wood stove. That they burn hot, and so that could be dangerous too. But for a fire starter, and I don't need little decorative cones. I don't need to put glitter on them and this magic stuff to make them pretty and to make them turn blue and yellow and green and stuff when they're burning. But just to have a few of them on hand when I want to reignite my fire quickly, or for camping. These would be great for camping. So I got this sidetracked bright idea that I was going to collect pine cones. So I did. And in about 5 minutes, I had a 5-gallon pail full of pine cones, all different kinds. And I'm going to let them dry out really good. And then I thought, So then when my grandkids came over later, we went out and picked some more pine cones real quick. So I got about 10 gallons worth of pine cones, and I'm going to put some of them in I've got this big copper pot from back in the day and it's got holes in the bottom, but it's not useful, but it's decorative. I like it. Quinn gave it to me. He found it someplace, and anyway, I'm going to put some of my pine cones in there so I can have them on hand if I just need a little. Sometimes when I get up in the morning, the fire's gotten really, really low, and Jeff always gets us a lot of kindling because we do burn wood all winter, and Jeff gets us barrels of kindling or whatever, but sometimes I don't have it right at hand. Sometimes it's out in the woodshed, and so I'm just going to keep a little handful of pine cones on fire on hand to reignite my fire. I think that'll be really handy. So when I was doing this, it got me thinking about types of people. Peter to Paul people. There's the people like me, and then there's the Peter to Paul people. Now we know that saying, don't borrow from Peter to pay Paul. In other words, if you've got a debt to Peter or to this institution, don't borrow from another institution or from your friend to pay this debt, because you still have the debt. You're going to owe your friend or the institution or whatever. And that's wise. But there are also people who do the same thing when it comes to projects. And now, I'm not dissing Jeffrey Lee, because I told him I was going to talk about this, and he had a response, and I'll tell you what it was after I tell you this story. He is a Peter to Paul project guy, okay? So, case in point, we had this wheelbarrow, and he had a couple years ago put some big heavy tires on the front end. He wanted a wide front end with 2 tires so that it would be more balanced in case I had to push it, or if I wanted to use it for the garden, or if I was bringing in some wood while he wasn't home or something. And it's worked out really well. That's been nice. But he wanted to, this year, to make a longer 4-wheeled cart that he could pull it over all kinds of terrain, in the ruts and over the hills and logs and bumps and through the woods, to be able to lay 4-length logs on it. When he goes out to the woods to get firewood, he likes to cut them into 4-foot lengths. And the wheelbarrow doesn't work. Sometimes he puts a chain around him, but if you can't always drive right up to where you're going to get the firewood, you've got to pull it a ways or haul it a ways. So he wanted to fabricate a cart to do that specific task. And he did. And it's great. But he needed two wheels. So where do you suppose he got them? He got them from the other wheelbarrow. See, I wouldn't do that. I would say, well, go buy 2 wheels or something. But he also is really good at refiguring things, so I cut him some slack. I told him that he does not touch my bucket. Now, see this bucket? Another case in point. This is Naomi's bucket. Naomi's bucket. I have specific buckets that I've purchased. I have one for dog food with a lid. I have one with a lid specifically for sunflower seeds for the birds and squirrels in the winter that I can feed them out of. And I have, this one is my utility bucket that I use for things like collecting pine cones, or maybe apples, or hauling stuff up from the garden or whatever. I just like to know that this is my bucket. It's where I put it in the milk house, that is kind of like my little garden building, and that it's going to be there when I want it. And I'm like, don't you touch my bucket. We have buckets around, because it's a farm. We have buckets around, but they tend to grow legs and disappear. And that's why I buy these buckets. I'm like, we have had so many buckets over the years from, plastering projects and whatnot. I shouldn't have to buy a bucket, really. But you'd be surprised how many Menards buckets we have. But this one is Naomi's. And I told him he couldn't touch it. So I told him also I was going to bring it up on the channel here. And he told me, well, I'm going to start a counter channel. And it's going to be all about the ways I'm sneaking off with your bucket and using it. Because he's funny that way. Hey, Timber. Timber the dog. He had to come and get an apple off this table that I'm sitting at. Silly dog. Anyway, So it's kind of like these steaks. Now, what I was doing before I decided to go online is I was cleaning out the garden, as I said, and I have stakes. And I have a bunch of wooden stakes, and some of them are really just sticks. They're just any kind of stake I can find to use to mark my rows. And then for the first time last year, I went and bought some long stakes, some 4-footers. These are, I don't know, plastic, or they feel like plastic, but maybe they're fiberglass or something. And they're just a nice composite stake, and they're real cheap. They're like, I think I paid $1.28 or $1.50 for the longer ones here. $1.28 maybe for the 3-footers. And I bought a whole bunch of them because I didn't have enough stakes, and I didn't want to go out in the woods and spend, a whole day cutting branches for things. So I bought these stakes that I'll use again next year. It worked really well. I also bought these little clips for some of them that you see. They're little plastic clips specifically for this kind of thing. I'm not a big fan. I'm not going to get... I'll get another year out of some of them, but a lot of them broke by the end of the season because of the weight of the tomatoes and things. Better off using just a fine twine, or not real fine, but a narrower twine and stuff. But now see, I would not, if I have leftovers of these, I will not be using them to mark the ends of my rows. Nope. I will be using these, or a broken branch from a tree, because we got a million of those around too. But these are specifically for my tomatoes, and that's it. I did use one that I bought specifically for it to mark one of my rhubarb plants, and I might use some for my rhubarb plants so that I can see where they're coming up in the spring and don't accidentally mow them off. So people are like stakes. We're two types. We're borrow for other things, or we're use the dedicated piece of equipment for the dedicated task. So don't you think? Are you one of those kinds of people? I have to include that in a book because I've been working on my book. When I first got sidetracked with the Pinecone project, I was working on, in the house, was working on getting my book formatted and everything for publication. And it took me a while to get back to it after that little bit of sidetracking. Now, I may not use the thing for which it is not dedicated, but I do get very sidetracked into other projects, as you can tell. So anyway, I'm hoping this video turns out okay and that the wind isn't too loud. It's a very October-y day out. The trees are just utterly gorgeous. I'm sitting in front of the pines, so you can't really see them. But I'll do a turnaround here so you can see some of the pretty trees out that way. And I'll take you over here to one of my favorite views of the farm and of the fields. I might have to duck down a little bit to see under these pine trees. That's my favorite view on the whole farm, out there to the fields. And I use it on my header for my website. So pretty. So pretty. So until the next time, I think I'll probably post a little short that I took of us collecting pine cones. And you guys take care, and hope your projects getting ready for the coming season change are going well, and that you have plenty of things and ways to stay warm this winter if you don't burn wood. And praying God will bless everybody who watches this video. Talk to you again.